Sorry about that.
Could you repeat?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Mr. Elumelu. My name is Uchenna Okeze. I am Nigerian. I am a 2018 Tony Elumelu entrepreneur. I'm starting a business, a Yellow Pages business, an online Yellow Pages business that will help promote local businesses and local service providers. I would like to know what is France's stand on the European immigration crisis. What is your practical approach and solution?
That's a huge issue. Europe lived 3 years ago a first wave of immigration coming from Syria, Afghanistan, and this region, with a lot of people leaving their countries because of war, and they get asylum in Europe. It created a lot of tension because it's something to get more than 1 million people arriving in Europe and being protected, but that's a pressure, and it created some tensions like your colleague described them. Now, what we see and what we are experiencing is a new wave of immigration coming largely through Libya from Africa, and another one coming through Morocco and Spain from Africa as well. Let me say first that we should not mix everything. And I want to make two precisions. First, migration between Africa and Europe, it's not brand new. People are becoming crazy everywhere. For decades, we've been migrations between our continents. For decades. And our job is to integrate people, and where my country probably failed a little bit is because of a lack of political energy and a lack of development, collective development, and we will discuss that with a lot of some private sectors present in this room precisely. We didn't sufficiently integrate the African diaspora and new people arriving in France in its economy and being recognized. But for decades, in my country, we had migrations coming from Africa, whole families and so on. So it's not new, it's not a crisis. This diaspora is made by our common history and the fact that there is a common language with a lot of countries in Africa and a lot of common families and so on. So first, that's the first distinction. Let's stop with these crazy ideas. Migration in its own is a bad idea, or it's just a crisis. It's a global phenomenon. It always existed, and we have it. The second point is that when you speak about migration, I don't like the word, because first you speak about people. People who took a lot of risks through the desert or the Mediterranean Sea, losing their lives, living in very difficult situations, spending months, not to say years, in camps, being exploited by smugglers. But we have a distinction. Some of these people are eligible to asylum because they are in war in their country. And they are at risk because of their political ideas or because of their religion. And this one has to be protected in Europe. It's part of my constitution in France. So no question, these people will always be welcomed and protected because of the asylum rules. And on the other side, you have a lot of people leaving their countries and taking all these risks for economic reasons and because of the lack of economic perspective and opportunities. And these people, given the magnitude of this wave, cannot be accepted. At least all of them. You can accept part of them where it's sustainable for your economy and your country. But you are not due to protect them because they come from a country in peace. And if you look at the migration crisis, as we say, i.e. this new wave, which is diminishing, by the way, the peak of the wave was last year. You have people coming, some of them coming from Sudan, Eritrea. That's a crisis. Political difficulties, wars, and so on. But a large majority of people coming from Africa came from Senegal, Ivory Coast, Guinea, Nigeria. look at the situation. These countries are in a better situation than a decade ago. And people who are leaving their countries are not the very poor people of these countries. They are very often middle classes, low middle classes, where the family can pay in order for them to pay the smugglers and go to Europe. So in Europe, we have crazy representation, crazy visions about that, because we mix everything. But what we have to do is obviously first to fight against smugglers. That's my top priority. That's what we do in Sahel. That's what we want to do with Libyan government. That's why we have to fix the Libyan situation, to stop that. And to work with all the African countries to fight against smugglers, because they are the one to live from this crisis. And because the smugglers are closely linked to the terrorists. Where are the smugglers? Precisely in all these regions where you have Boko Haram, ACME, and all these crazy guys. They live with them. But more than that, the roots of this new wave, and the fact that these people came from the countries I mentioned, and not the very poor country without wars, is due to the fact that there is a lack of hope, a lack of opportunities. And for me, the in-depth, the sustainable answer is not just security and work, and it obviously is this work against smugglers, but that's a work with the different African governments and African Union to build a better future for this new generation. And what does it mean in a nutshell? First, we have to deal with demography. It was a taboo till now. I spoke about that 1 year ago. It was a huge scandal, especially in Europe. It was not allowed for a European leader to speak about demography, birth rate in a lot of countries. But I'm sorry to say that when you have 7, 8 children per woman, you can have a 5% growth. It's not, you will never end the fight against poverty. And guess what? And a lot of people trying to tell me, my friend, it's part of the African culture, you should not say that. In Europe, centuries ago, we had so many children. But ask your women, ask your ladies if this is their choices. If this is their free choices, I'm fine. But when this situation is due to forced marriage, when this situation is due to the decrease of education for women and girls, it's crazy. It's crazy. And that's why you have very, very bold leaders in Africa today. President Issoufou in Niger, for instance, he fought against forced marriage. He invested a lot on girls' education. That's the very first pillar to me. I multiplied by 10 our investments on girls' education in Africa. And we need all of you because, that's the basics. Second, it's obviously, demography. Education for everybody. Primary, secondary school, universities. You have such a wave of young people. And a lack of universities. A lot of these young people, a lot of what we call these migrants, are just people in a situation not to go to universities in their country. So that's for the best reasons they decide to go to Europe. It's just the fact that they want to get access to school, to universities, they want to learn. The investment in education is very important. That's why we worked with President Macky Sall. And we increased together with a lot of commitments coming from all over the world for education, and especially education in Africa. Third, it's economic opportunities. It's business opportunities. It's involvement of private sectors. A lot of these people just want to get access to jobs and to live. Do you think it's a free choice, and that's a perspective, to make thousands of kilometers, to take all these risks, to have the perspective to live in a poor neighborhood in Europe with the privilege to send some money every month to your family home. It's crazy. Those who think it's a privilege are just crazy. What these people want is to succeed in their country. And they want to have the opportunity to do so. That's the actual solution. That's my view for that. It's a long-term perspective, but where we have to resist to emotions and short-term emotions. We have to resist to protect and get this message understandable for European middle classes to avoid a new gap. And we have to work with African governments precisely to win these different battles.